And we'll over to Professor Roy.
Thank you. So I'm continuing with, actually I'm picking up from where I left in last session. We'll show some of the MPI programs. We first take a Jacobi solver for Laplace equation, for which the algorithm I have discussed in last session, sequential single processor code, and then we'll identify where we can put the MPI constructs to make it parallelize. Then we'll look into it. Then we'll see some of the interesting aspects of performance over multiple processors. As we'll increase number of processors, how the speed up is coming, etc. I'm audible, right?
Yeah, you are audible. Okay. Slide is also visible.
Okay. And then I hope time will permit, I'll show you a Monte Carlo MPI program also. But if time doesn't permit, then I have to leave here, but this will be the slide we can look into it later. So this is recapitulation what we discussed in last class. That we have a large domain. In domain decomposition, we have a large domain in which we are solving Laplace equation with all Dirichlet boundary conditions. In domain decomposition, we break it down into several subdomains and solve each subdomain independently. While doing that, we dynamically exchange data across the subdomains, and that has to be done using MPI communication calls. And then also iterate to get a global convergence. Steps are divide the domain into number of subdomains. Domain overlaps are allowed such that full Rho equation for each internal point of subdomain is available. So last session there has been a question of whether overlap is required, what should be the overlap, etc. The guideline, general guideline is that full Rho equation for each internal point is available. That determines what should be the amount of overlap. But this is a general guideline. There can be violations under certain special conditions. Then start with a global case. Updates or iterate in each subdomain locally. Consider the interdomain boundaries that what came from last updated solution value, and these iterations are done parallelly in all subdomains. Once the iteration is done, do the data transfer, take data from the neighboring subdomain and substitute it. And it is also observed that after waiting for converged iteration in one subdomain, because we are trying to iterate for a global case, if we get the whenever the boundary values are updated, if we get them transferred. So if you can compare between Jacobi and Gauss-Seidel. In Jacobi, we'll do the iterations first and update all the points there. But in Gauss-Seidel, whatever the updated values we'll use for the iteration. So similarly, as the boundary values are updated, during iterations also, if you do some data transfer, it gives you faster convergence. We'll see that in a while. And then you need to get global convergence, desynchronization, etc. So this is a typical Jacobi solver that all the for all the rows you start with a guess value and update the value at the diagonal element or at each point using guess value at all neighboring rows, and keep on updating that, keep on iterating that till you get a convergence. Now in this example, we will solve a 2D Laplace equation, which is nabla square t is equal to 0. Make a two-dimensional mesh. I is equal to 0 to nx, j is equal to 0 to ny. And the equation for each ij point is this with the error given. This can be represented by sequential numbering 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. If we use the numbering that a point P will be identified from ij is equal as P is equal to j into nx, number of points in nx, and number of passes in the j direction starting from j plus I. That will be the low pointer of, if we sequentially renumber the point, that will be a pointer for each point. If we do that, then we can substitute each of the row equation into an element of the matrix equation, and we can write down the matrix equations, and we'll get the A matrix in that way. Then the question will come that we have to substitute the boundary condition. So at the boundaries, the matrix row, which is P, which will come from again this substitution of ij. So The matrix row will have Pij is equal to Bc. That means in the matrix equation only the diagonal term is 1, the right hand term is the boundary condition, and this is as TP, and all the off diagonals are 0 because this represents the equation TP is equal to TBC. That in any boundary point, we will substitute the equation by 1 in the diagonal and 0 in all of diagonals. And the right hand side we have the boundary. In the boundary row, the diagonal is 1, of diagonals are 0, and RH is B vector. Element is the boundary. And then you get the full matrix and solve it using iterative method. This is basically what we are doing in this. So let us look into the sequential code, and one by one we'll identify where we can parallelize that. We initially defined for the pointer finding out the position, sequential position of each point, because we have an equation with Ij which has to be converted into a matrix equation. So this is a two-dimensional array which has to be converted into a vector. We use this pointer. So we write a function for p which will give the position of each pointer based on Ij. Now I have a domain length 1 and 1, define the domain and the number of steps. This is when we run the program, we'll ask the user to give the input number of steps, because you can vary the number of steps. Based on the number of steps, step size delta x and delta y will change, and based on delta x and delta y, the accuracy of the method will be, the accuracy of the solution will change. And so we get delta x and delta, user will give the input number of steps. Based on that, you will get delta x and delta y. Based on that, you will calculate the coefficients 1 by delta x squared, 1 by delta y squared. Now, if you have to, this pointer will convert the Ij index in the two-dimensional array to a one-dimensional array, so that you can write the matrix equation. If you have to write a parallel program on that, so I'm trying to explain you that starting from a sequential code, how can we parallelize it? I hope this will be useful for many beginners. So if you have to identify the parallel constructs, what will be there? That initially MPI has to be initialized. You have to write, we have to include MPI.h, and then we have to write MPI init, call MPI init function. Then this IO, this is reading from the user. All the process should not try to read from the user. User is giving input, and there will be contention then. So one of the process will read the input, what are the number of steps, and then it will broadcast it to others. And then once you get the number of steps in x and y, number of steps in x and y, you know the total number of nodes. And there you should do the load balancing, that what should be number of loads in each process. Depending on, and again, in MPI, how do we define what are the number of process? By the execution command. MPI run minus NP, that number of process and the executable. So from the, and then using MPI com and MPI size and MPI rank, one can find out what is the total number of process and what is the rank of a process. So one should read the number of process from the user input. The number of process is user input in an MPI program. And using that, one has to do the load balancing. So a small, some programming lines, some lines have to be added in the program which will read the number of processes as com size, and from the size of the size, it will do a domain decompose, do a load balancing. Then we allocate. So in the sequential program, we found out total number of nodes. Based on that, we allocate. We'll see what is the total number of points in the matrix, and then based on number of nodes in x and number of nodes in y, based on which all the matrices, A matrix will be allocated, B vectors will be allocated, and they are initialized. Now when you look for the parallel construct, this should be done, this allocation, initialization should be done for the local matrix, not for the entire global matrix, because each process is seeing its local matrix only. So wherever we are doing this allocation, the endpoint is not for the total number of points in x and y in the entire subdomain. It is for the total number of points in x and y in the specified subdomain, in each local subdomain. Each process should use the variables endpoint, local, or something, so that it can do this mapping. And along with the solution, the coefficient matrix, right hand side vector, solution vector, along with that, we also need to prepare the data transfer buffer. There has to be single dimensional contiguous memory location, single dimensional arrays, which will be transferred by MPI as the interdomain boundary condition. So once you know the number of points in each subdomain, you should also prepare the data transfer buffer. You should also allocate that memory. Then can everybody mute themselves? Then we'll build the local matrix. What will be building the local matrix? For the internal point, the coefficients will be there 1 by delta x square, 1 by delta x square minus 2 by delta x square plus delta y square in the diagonal. For the bound, yeah.
Or end of the file name without extension. Word of put a dot in it.
Okay. Okay. So everybody, please be sure that you are muted. Otherwise, it creates a disturbance. So in the internal points, if I go back, the internal points we have all these in the coefficient matrix. In the boundaries, we have only one in the coefficient matrix, and right hand side vector has the boundary value. So that has to be done later. That for internal points, you make the coefficient matrix as specified. At the boundary point, left, right, bottom, top, put the boundary conditions. Make the diagonal to be 1 and off diagonals are already 0, and the boundary values in at that location, what will be the value that should be put in the right hand side. So in the leftmost boundary is 1, and the bottommost boundary is 1, and right and topmost boundary is 0. That has to be ensured. So this is how you are ensuring boundary condition. Now, when you are parallelizing it, it has to be done for the local matrix. Another thing, if we are doing 1D domain decomposition, then you have to identify physical and interdomain boundaries separately. In the interdomain boundary, you cannot say then you have to talk about left and right. If you are doing left and right, if you are doing 1D domain decomposition in X direction. For some of the local processes, the left and right boundaries are interdomain boundary. You cannot write the boundary condition as 1 or 0 there. It will come whatever, it will be given dynamically whatever is coming from the neighboring process. But for the first and last domain, for the first domain, leftmost boundary is a physical boundary. For the last domain, rightmost boundary is a physical boundary. You have to identify these two domains separately and specify the boundary conditions there. So that has to be done. So you have to check for physical and interdomain boundaries. Then do the iteration. Start with a global. Already there is a global case. Already everything is initialized with 0. Do the iteration, find out the local, find out the error for each point. Over the entire domain, you find out the global error, and if global error, do the update. The new solution, new case will be the old updated solution will be the new case. And if global error is less than the max global error, which is given as 10 to the power minus 12, then it breaks. The iterations convert. Yes, else you have to keep on doing the iterations. What will be the steps here? You have to do this iteration not for all the points, but only for the local internal points. You have to find out the local error, and you cannot directly find out the global error comparing all the points in a subdomain. From all the points in a subdomain, you will get global error, and then you have to use MPI reduce to get errors from all other domains and get the global error. And after you do run a set of iteration, you have to use MPI send receive for interdomain data transfer and substitute it into the right hand side, because it's a boundary condition. It will go to the right hand side. Substitute the values in there. Substitute the updated values from the neighboring subdomain. That's the updated X from the neighboring subdomain as the boundary condition, which will go to the B vector, right hand side vector of the present subdomain. You have to do this substitution. And based on the maximum error, so from global error you calculate the local error, you will calculate global error by MPI reduce. Based on the global error or based on the maximum error of all processes, you take a decision whether convergence has been done. So this is we'll look into a sequential program. We'll identify these are the steps which are required to make it parallelized. So we'll start with MPI.h, right? If you can see, this is the parallel program, MPI.h. We'll put the MPI header file. Then MPI init initializes MPI. MPI com size and com rank reads what is the total number of process and what is the rank of that particular process. This will be required often. Now, from the process which has rank 0, we call it master. There is no master slave, classical master slave arrangement in an MPI program, in general MPI program, but we call it master because it will do all the IO, all the communication with the user input output. So, my rank 0, only one processor, or everything will be executed by all the processes in MPI. All the processors will execute same time. If we ask one of the process to specifically do something, like if my rank is equal to 0, only that process will execute that number. That it will read the number of steps in X and Y from user, and then this will be broadcasted. So for there you do not need to write if my rank is equal to 0. It's written that my rank is equal to 0 will broadcast an integer of size 1 through the communicator MPI com world to which all the processes are connected. And what will it communicate? The integer of size 1, which is stored as number step 6. And this will go to all the process. All the processes will read the value as its number steps in X. Similarly, number steps in Y will read by all the processes. Now, all processes will independently calculate their step size by the domain length is same. In all processes, domain length is defined same. 1 by number of steps. So, we are considering a uniform mesh here. For a non-uniform mesh, it has to be done little different. Then it will be little more complex. And then all the processes will calculate the X and Y coefficients here. Now, you have to do load balancing and mapping. So we have discussed it earlier. We take the total number of internal points and uniformly divide it. Of course, we cannot uniformly divide it if the number of internal points is not exactly divisible by the number of processes in block, by the size of the number. So what we'll do, if there are some remainders, we'll one by one distribute the remainder to some processes. So some will get only one more task than the others. And then after that, after doing the load balancing, we have to add the overlap loads and we have to prepare the data transfer buffers also. This we have discussed earlier. So what we do here, we do the load balancing by number of steps in X subdomain. X in each subdomain is num step X divided by n proc. Each processor is doing it independently. We are not doing it in a master and distributing it. It's a simple calculation. It's better to do it independently in each process rather than doing it in one process and then utilizing the network cable, which is much slower. So instead, because the communication to compute overhead will be higher if you do simple calculations in one process and distribute among others. Simple calculations we do in all processes. So we do this if the rank of the process is less than the remainder, then we add with the number of steps in X. So each process gets that number of steps in X for this. This value is different for different processes. Might be different for different processes. But the variable name remains same because in program we write up the same program with same variable names which run in all processes. Okay. So then we find out number of nodes in X and number of nodes in Y, and then if we'll do a global start and end, we find out what is the global start, we map it to the global processes, global start, global end, etc. And then we incorporate the domain the domain overlap by if it is not the 0th process of the last process. 0th process has one physical boundary, last process also has one physical boundary. Then only one, if it is 0th process or last process, then only one overlap domain will be added. If not, then two in both sides there will be overlap. We add overlap in the number of nodes in X. And then we have to allocate local matrices. This number of nodes in X is different for different processes based on the domain decomposition. So we calculate the local number total points in each domain and allocate the variables accordingly. Allocate and initialize that accordingly, do it for the locals. this size of the local domain, initialization of the local vectors and matrices. But we also have to do something with the boundary conditions now. This is interesting. That for the leftmost boundary, this is leftmost physical boundary. This belongs to the leftmost process. I rank is equal to 0. Its left boundary is a physical boundary, so we put the B value to be 1 here. There are boundary conditions there. For all other processes, leftmost boundary is not a physical boundary. So we do not write anything B, but in the A matrix we write that this is a boundary. This will be a boundary. Similarly, we do the same thing for the rightmost one. If the my rank is nproc minus 1, last process. Process the ID start from 0 to n minus 1. So for n, the rightmost one is a physical boundary, populate the B vector. For the others, the rightmost ones are not physical boundaries, we do not populate. For topmost and bottommost, all are physical boundary and we populate. This belongs to process 0 and this belongs to process total size minus 1. So set up the main domain boundary conditions. And defining the interdomain boundaries are right now defined. Only A matrix has the information that these are interdomain boundaries. What will be the value that will be transferred later? Now, for each subdomain for the internal points, we define the matrix, which is same here, but it can be different, more complex. There can be more complex applications, but here all the boundaries are same delta x delta y. Therefore, all the domains have same delta x delta y, so the internal matrix is same. This is the conversion of the equation to that. And this P is the function which notes to the to that ij point, which points to that. Is a pointer function, points to that. Now we have to prepare the data transfer buffer. The data that will be sent to write. What is the number of points there? The number of nodes in y direction that will be sent to the data. Right? If we see the data transfer, this data will be sent to the next domain. So the number of points in y will be sent to the next domain. So the data transfer buffer will have number of nodes in y. Similarly, data transfer buffer in L all will have number of nodes in y. We send the buffer send to right process, right side, send to left side, receive from left side, receive from right side. These are the data transfer buffers. You can name it differently. This is the name I gave in order to understand, in order to better understand. And we also use a timing variable here, which is an MPI time function, which will calculate the time required for doing the computation, and we'll see what is the performance improvement. And we put a barrier here that up to this stage all the process will come and synchronize, and then because time calculation will start, we'll try to calculate time required for iterations in all the processes. All the processes in Y line will be sent to neighboring process. And then we start the iterations. We'll go for a very large number of iterations. If it converges, it will definitely converge within that. And when it will converge, it will come out of the iteration. At the beginning, we populate the send buffers. At the beginning of the iterations, we have the guess values. So these guess values will come to the send buffer. And based on the, you can check yourself later that based on the way we have put the overlap boundaries, etc., num nodes minus x will be an internal point which will go to the next right hand side matrix. And second one is which starts from 0, 1, 2. 2 is the internal point which will go to the left matrix. So 1, 1 are the 0 is 1 is the first internal point. It's not being sent. The second internal point will be sent. This you can check later. This is correct. Start the iterations in such domain and put the entire data in y direction, which will be sent into an array. Because this is not a contiguous matrix. This comes from pointer of different j locations, but put them into a 1D matrix, into a contiguous matrix, in 1D matrix, 1D array, which will be sent. This is the x, older x that will be sent. The received data must go to the appropriate location in the receiving subdomain. Program has a local view of data. Each processor works on its local data. It doesn't know that this is from next processor, etc. It receives the data from some process, but while working, it looks into the local data only. So this the data which is coming, that will augment the local data. The neighboring processor send data will augment the local data, and this will be put in the hello cell. Programmer needs to keep a global view of the data, but the processors, as they will operate only in the local data. So ghost or hello cell do not exist in global scenario, we have discussed, but essential in local solutions. So what will happen, that this data will go and sit here, and this data will come from here and sit here, and this will happen for all the processes. This we have discussed earlier. So this is the X value, this will be the boundary. Boundary will go in the B right hand side. So we can see that send to R with the size number nodes in Y, MPI double. This will be sent to the next process of myLength plus 1 with the tag 100. And the next process, so all the event processes are sending this. Right? If the reminder divided by 20, event ID process. If the process has an odd ID, if this is 1, this will receive it. So whatever is sent, if the process is even sent, the other process will receive the data, and what will be received? The data is sent to the right process, the rightmost process. Rightmost process will the next right process. The next right process, the sender is the left process, so it will receive it as received from left, and it will be sent to the next right process, myLength plus 1. The receiving process will receive it from the left process with rank myLength minus 1. And this odd even staggering is done to avoid bottleneck. Similarly, data at all the boundaries will be sent. Now this data is received as received from L. Right? So look into the boundary domains, they do less data transfer. This received data will be now, what is received from L will be now mapped to the B vector of the neighboring domain. What is received from right will go to what is received from the right domain. Right boundary will be in the last in the X plus 1th location. So it will go into J is equal to num nodes. This will go to receive from right. Yeah, this will go to num nodes minus X minus 1 last cell, physically last cell, the last hello cell, and whatever is received from left will go to 0, the first hello cell. And this is how the data transfer will happen. And then you have populated the boundary conditions and do the iterations, and these iterations are done for the internal points only. Now, after the iteration, you calculate local error, put an explicit barrier. It's not actually needed, but it is a good practice to put an explicit barrier. Allreduce has an implicit barrier, but you can do one more level of synchronization. Put an explicit barrier. From the local error, call an MPI allreduce and get the global error. Local error is what is the difference between previous X and present X in this iteration, but call an MPI allreduce and get the difference among all the processes. And if global error is less than global error max, then you say that global it has converged, else you keep on doing the iterations. So here we are not explicitly doing convergence in the local domains, but we are directly checking for global convergence. And this is similarly work. Iteration broke if the global error is 1, and write the global error after the iteration. And then once the iteration breaks, then you say that what is the time calculated by MPI W time, and write that this is the time required, and write convergence setting, finalize it, come out of the MPI. This is how the parallel Jacobi solver will be done, and this is entirely developed by using the sequential Jacobi solver. This is with little effort, maybe for a beginner with couple of weeks effort, you can write a parallel Jacobi solver following the steps. Now we started looking into solution using 2 processor, 4 processor, etc. We have seen that the solutions are continuous across the domain over the block boundaries, and it matches with the solution for single processor. There is no reason that it should not match. Also, find out what is the computational time when you move from 1 to 24 process. For 100 points, total 100 points, 10 by 10 points, one process takes 4.09 into 10 to the power minus 2. In two process, it is not exactly half, but it is 2.75. It's little more than half, but it is reduced. In 4 process, it is further reduced. In 8 process, it increases actually. For 420 by 20 matrix, it reduces 1.74 to 0.71, 4 process 0.25, 8 process 0.15, and then it increases. But in 10,000, so 100 by 100, the computational time keep on decreasing as you increase number of processes, which is good as per theory that parallel performance is better for larger problems. What is happening in smaller problems? Computation is okay because the problem is not large. There is some computation, but communication is high as you are increasing number of processors. Communication is increasing compared to the computation, and therefore parallel performance is not good. But if you have large problem, then parallel performance is actually good. So you should use large number of processes only when your problem is large enough. If for a small problem you use large number of processes, communication and other overheads are high and the performance will actually decrease. This is a very important message that parallelization is essential for some cases, but parallelization is desirable only when you have a large problem. For small problems, you can light it and debug it, that is okay, but do not think of getting good performance using parallel for small problems. Only for large problems, this is meaningful. But there is, apart from that, there is something which is very interesting, that for 100 and 400 for small problems, performance falls, performance is poor than the that higher processor than lower processors. Another interesting thing is that in 100,000, the performance, say, when you go to 1 to 2 processor, computational time is reduced by 7. When you go to 2 to 4 processor, computational time is reduced by 2. When you go to 4 to 8 processor, computational time is further reduced by 4 times. The speed increases more rapidly than number of processors. So it tells of something like super scalable, efficiency is greater than 1. By theory, this is not possible. By theory, your speed should not use more than the number of processors because there are many overheads. So what is going on here? Is it super scalable? Now we see that in a Jacobi row operation, as the number of processes increases, number of domain increase, and operations in the row reduce, because instead of multiplying over the large domain, we are doing this multiplication, AJX, we are doing it for a small matrix. We can do that because a lot of the terms are 0 in the matrix. Anyway, we could have ignored them. So the matrix is smart and the sparse, and the multiplication with these terms are anyway redundant. So we are on doing an inefficient in the single sequential code. Also, we are doing an inefficient interpolation implementation where a lot of zeros are being multiplied. And by theory, parallelization should be done over an efficient implementation. If you have an inefficient implementation, you should first try to make it efficient. You should first try to drop the redundant calculations and look for parallelization. So what we did, that instead of considering all the non-zero numbers, we told that we'll only take the considering all the zero numbers and multiplying x vector with the zeros here, we'll only take the non-zeros, we'll only store the non-zeros and do the multiplication with them. And in sequential time, so what was, say, 710 here for multiplying with all the numbers in the row. When we do for only the non-zero number, sequential time came down to 11.77. Again, this is accessing a lot of points which are not in the same cache line. If we do a cache coherent implementation, it comes down to 7.12 seconds. So now we can see with the previous implementation that we'll only consider the non-zero numbers. We try to parallelize it. We'll see that the performance is even poor for smaller cases. But for larger number of cases, larger number of nodes, the computational time it doesn't reduce by half from 1 to 2. It reduced by something like 0.6, 0.7 times, which is good as per theory because the problem size is not again very large. But it keeps on reducing and it follows a line less than 45% if we take speed up versus the clock. And this is better for if we go to 100,000 from 10,000, the performance improves. And this is as per theory. If we take taken efficient implementation. And if we go for million by million matrix, the performance is even better. Speed up is better, always better for larger programs. And speed up is always less, that the sequential time by parallel time is always less by the number of processes. This is also as per theory. We get near linear speed up here if we go to around 1 million cells. So instead of the 100 by 100 grid, if we go to 1000 by 1000 grid, the speed up is more linear. But the computational time is much higher. However, it reduces linearly with increasing number of processes. So anyway, parallelization is good when you have large problems. I think I have little more time. Where is my? Let me check the time. Yeah, I think I have 15 minutes more. I'll quickly show another method and then I'll take the solution. So this is whatever we have discussed are very relevant for some of the calculations on PDEs, but we go little out of PDEs. We will look into a statistical method called Monte Carlo method. It solves a problem through statistical method. The basics is that you, instead of solving a problem deterministic way, you assign multiple random variables and try that as trial solutions. And we do a statistical sampling on the trial solutions and see that you get into a statistically convergent value which matches with the deterministic solution. And this is used in many application domains, physics, engineering, finance, etc. This involves, because you are trying with random trial solutions. So this is not a knowing decomposition method. This is not a PDE solution also. This is calculating some physical variable using some random trial solutions and doing a statistical approach. So this involves drawing large number of random variable. You actually cannot create random variable in computer. What you create a pseudo random variable. That you create a sequence of pseudo random variable and use that for getting the ensemble average. And in parallel implementation, this random number generation has to be done in parallel. So let us see what is in a Monte Carlo. The most famous Monte Carlo example, most basic Monte Carlo example is finding the value of pi. Monte Carlo is a city, is a casino city. People used to go for playing for gambling there. One of the gambling technique was that you will get a dartboard. You have to make throws to the dart and calculate the points. If your points are within a range, then you within a pre-specified range, then you win the game. And then statistician observed that if you keep on throwing dart in a square board, you have a square board, and if you keep on throwing dart, keep on throwing random darts, and then if you calculate what are the number of darts put inside a circle, divided by the total number of darts. This is the total number of darts, and these are the darts put inside the circle. If the number of throws are large enough, then the ratio of the number of throws in the circle and the total number, and if you multiply that, this is equal to pi. That is the ratio of the area of this 4 times of ratio of the area inside the circle and the ratio of the square. So there is a relation. It's a deterministic, it's a probabilistic throw, but when you have large number of samples, the average gives you a statistically convergent value. And this is used in many cases in order to predict path of a molecule, in order to solve heat conduction equation. In many examples there where this method is used, that you use large number of random variables, do some calculations, sum them up, get a statistically convergent value, which is the physical value. So efficacy of this method depends on the random number sets, that the random numbers should be right random numbers, and there should be large number of random numbers also, which gives the location of the point. So you start with randomly throwing the dart. So this location will come from a random number. If the random numbers are correctly predicted, then, and if you do calculation of a large number of random numbers, then you will get the right value of pi. So what we did, we wrote a small C program that the coordinate of each point will generate a random number r using inbuilt rand function, and this random number should be in between 0 to 1. That's the idea. And coordinate of each point will be calculated x and y based on the random number. If the location of the point is within the circle, then we add one with the dart throw. I have one of my dart added a score, and for large number of dart throw, here we are considering 1000 dart throws. So we calculate 1000 random points, see how many points are within the circle. If that, and then we'll approximate pi as n score by n dart into 4. And then this is the total number of throws. We change the total number of throws, and these are the random XY locations. Update of score. So we, for 1000 throws, we saw that the value is 3.0880. Real value is something higher. For 10,000 throws, it improved. It is 3.1196 value of pi. For 100,000 throws, it improved more, 3.14370. For 1,000 throws, it is in fact more closer to pi. So if we can get large number of throws, if we can get more throws, we'll get more accurate solution. And now if we have many processors, each processor is doing some of the throws, and we are adding up all the throws. So if we have 100 processors, each is doing 10 to the power 6 throws, we'll get 10 to the power 8 throws and can get accurate solution. So a large number of throws using many processors will be useful. So what we'll do? We initially thought that we'll take different process. Each process will calculate its random numbers, do the throws, calculate the number of scores, total number of throws, and it will sum up the number of scores and number of throws. Number of throws is same in each process. So we multiply number of throws into the number of processes, and score from each process will come to a collective communicator. Will find out the sum of the scores, divide it, and get the value. Instead of send receive from many processes, we'll use an MPI reduce or not reduce with the sum operation. So let us look into the code. That it's an MPI code. MPI starts with MPI.h, MPI init, etc. Each process is calculating its score. Then this code is transferred to a master process, to a process of my ID 0 using MPI all reduce and summing up. While transferring, it's getting summed up. So what comes as n score underscore all is the summation of scores from all the processes, and we find out the value of pi. So if we increase number of processes, our calculation will be more accurate. Interestingly, it doesn't work. I'll show you in a while. So this is where we are calculating score from 1000 throws in each process, and we are adding up the scores from all the processes in MyID 0 in one of the processes. Each process sends n scores and sums up n score to all from all processes in n score all. This happens for all processes. MPI all reduce used. If you use MPI reduce, now MPI all reduce means all process knows the value of n score underscore all. If reduce is used, then only a designated process. That should not make a problem. It's a collective communication. Processes find the value of pi using n score underscore all and n darts, and divided by n darts into n procs, because each process is throwing n darts. Finally, process 0 writes to the string. This my ID 0 writes to the string. So let us see what happens. When I use 2 processes for 1000, it is 3.0. When I use 20 processes, it is still same. It should have increased. When I used 30 processes, it is same. What is same as when I used 1 process, the value is same. So the values of pi is not increasing, but it should have increased. As we increase number of processes, we expected that the calculation will improve because number of throws are increasing. But this is not increasing. So I thought, what's going wrong? I'll take 5 minutes more. We went in to find what went wrong. And we found that wrote that what is the we'll check what is the local value. What is the value of n score in your process, and what is the value of n score underscore all. And we see that all the processes, we done it in 2 processes, both the processes same n score. We done it in 3 processes, all the processes have same n score. We done it in 4 processes, all the processes have same n score. And therefore, when we are summing it up, we are not seeing any difference. All the processes giving the same value. Summation divided by the total throw is giving the same value. So we can see n score is same for all the processes. When n score can be same for each process, that means the location of coordinates are exactly same in each process. That means that the random number generated is also same in each process. Finally, pi is same value as the solution because the local value is same as the global value. So solution is not included. This is due to the fact that same sequence of random number is generated in each process. And there is, I mean, you can search, there are a lot of discussions on how to generate random numbers parallelly. If you run parallel processes and ask all of them to generate random numbers, they will come with same sequence of random numbers because the numbers are not actually same, they are pseudo-random. So we have to think of another solution. The solution is a random number using a random number generator server. One of the process will be designed as a server. It will generate random numbers. So only one sequence of random number is generated and the random numbers are distributed among different processes. So one process will not take part in calculation of pi. It will only generate random numbers and give it to the processes. They will do the calculations. The server calculates random numbers but doesn't calculate pi. Collective communication, therefore, these processes will only generate pi, will get pi. So when we do a collective communication, we cannot take the server into it. Server is not giving any value. So we have to create a new communicator, a new group of processes which will do the collective communication and send the values of pi or score to the master process. Send receive operation, one idea can be send receive operation among designated processes which is not optimized. Collective calling all clients. Server will generate the random number only. The client, workers and masters, they will calculate the value of pi and they will make a new communicator inside which they will communicate and sum up the values of pi. How that will be done? That all the processes in general belong to a communicator MPI-COM world. It shows creation of a new communicator also. So we'll group all the processes in MPI-COM world. From this group, we'll take away the server, create a new group. In the new group, we'll create a new communicator which will communicate for the values of pi. For the values of random number, there is a server which is already generating random number and sending to the processes. For calculation of pi, there is a new communicator in which locally all the processes are calculating what is the number of throws. This is coming from the random number, coming from the random number generator server. And these number of throws are communicated to a master which is finally calculating pi. And MPI functions are used for that. So this is a MPI function that from MPI-COM world, you get a new group called world group. From the world group, you take away the process of rank 1. You create a new group of workers group. From the workers group, you create a new communicator called workers. And whenever this worker is your new communicator, worker group is your new communicator. Whenever you will do so you do the same thing. One process is generating random number. One particular process is generating random number and sending others. When this is communicating with others, this is through the COM world, through all the default communicator. But when other processes which are calculating in score are distributing the values among themselves, they are using the new communicator, new COM. So this is an example where a little differently MPI can be used in a more complex algorithm. This is the random number generator server, and this is this collection from send receive between the random number generator and the processors which are the client through MPI-COM world. Because this is there is a default communicator, but the communication within the client is through a new communicator, new COM. And now if you change the number of processors, you can see the value of pi is changed. And for different processors, the value of local pi is different, and the real and the calculated pi is improving. From 3 processes, it was 3.1528. It was 3.146659. In 8 processes, it is 3.1428. So it is increasing. Everyone increasing the processes. So you can keep on increasing the number of processors, and you can see that your value of pi is approaching more towards the actual value. So you can get more accurate solution by increasing number of processes. Here, MPI is used in order to improve accuracy. You have the same code. If you get larger machine, you will get more accurate solution. So somewhere where accuracy and HPC are interlinked. If you have a smaller cluster, you have to go ahead with less accurate system. Well, there is a very good tutorial in Lawrence Livermore's National Labs page. You can look into that MPI tutorial. A lot of things are there. So we have looked into a CDL Jacobi code, identified the scopes of parallelization. We have actually parallelized it and looked into scalability. Then we looked into parallelization of Monte Carlo pi simulation. Looked into two concepts. One is a server which is giving parallel random numbers. A random number generator server in an environment, and then creating a new communicator and intercommunication with these two are. I mean, there is not much scope of doing much details, but some of the important aspects are discussed. Okay, thank you, and I can take questions. If you have questions, you can raise your hands. Yes, you can unmute yourself and ask the question. You have to unmute yourself.
Yes, sir. Sir, I have a question about the random number server which is generating. How it is communicating with the other other processors, sir? I don't understand that.
It is generating random numbers, sending to other processors. See, MyID nproc -1 is the random number generator server. It's generating the random number one. So it's generating a sequence, but for one by one, the sequence it is generating, it is doing a send to the. So I is the number of the variable for number of for that process. So it is sending to I -1. Nproc -1 is sending to each I -1. Different values of I, different processes getting that random number. And also again for different values of my ID, they are receiving it from nproc -1. Simple send receive.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Any other question? Yes.
Pritireka, please speak.
Yes, sir. So, sir, I have a question regarding the fact that if we are having a very complex domain, then how can we identify like which are the processors are falling in the physical boundaries in order to specify the physical boundary conditions? So, is there any way that we can?
Yes. When you generate the mesh, in the mesh you identify the physical boundaries, and you can probably make a new data structure or new array for the physical boundaries. And while distributing the nodes, you also distribute that structure. So from there you can get it. And these are very this goes more into graph theories.
Okay, so that is the responsibility of the programmer to have it tracked, right?
Sure, in MPI everything is programmer's responsibility.
Okay, yeah, okay. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, Suman, can you please unmute yourself?
Hello. Yeah, my question is when different processes generate, let's say, some random numbers, then how the seeds of the random number decide among the processes?
I mean, the other way which I have not shown you, other way is that you can predefine some of the seeds. Otherwise, it will take a seed based on the compiler, and unfortunately, the seed is same. But else, you can define the seed. If you define the seed, then what can happen that, I mean, you have to give an algorithm for the seed. So sometimes we do that seed is equal to seed plus minus. Then what happens? A part of the sequence is generated in one process, part of the sequence is generated for the other process. There is some overlap among the random numbers. So that is also not very advisable way to do it, but for small random number sets, you can go ahead with predefining the seeds. Instead of using the random number generator server, you can predefine the seeds. Otherwise, seeds are defined randomly. Seeds are defined by the compiler, and there comes the question whether the seeds are same as well as the sequence comes.
So in by default case, there could be a possibility that for two processes the seed could be same.
That is what happening here. Exactly, that is what happening here. The random number sets are same. And if you print out the random number seed, it is same in all the processes. So this is one disadvantage with OpenMP. I think MPeach also has this disadvantage that compilers do not know that they are random number generator doesn't know that they are running a parallel environment, that they end up in getting same seed.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so Saurabh, can you please unmute yourself and speak?
Asked that in our case, doing some Monte Carlo simulation, we do the random number generation in the process. It's in the core itself. So we use an algorithm and put the seed, which is a function of the rank and the time of the core.
Right. These solutions are there. But I mean, I told you that for larger set, if your algorithm is not smart enough, then you can keep on repeating the same sequence. But you can avoid that. These solutions are there. If there are smarter algorithms, you can avoid this.
Another thing is that these talks is very informative, and I am very grateful to you for such great talk, and it is very important to my work also. The thing is, whatever you code you gave, you showed that are in terms of short snippets of the code. So it is possible. Is it possible to give the whole code in a file so that we can go through it?
Write to me separately. I have to dig out and write to me separately.
Yeah, that will be very helpful. We have to dig through.
Requires, and there are different codes for different cases. You write to me, I'll give you.
Okay. Thank you.
I also have an NPTEL lecture you can look into.
Yeah.
Performance scientific. Okay. There are a lot of material at this course.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, Kaushik, can you please unmute and speak?
Hello, am I audible, sir?
Yes.
Yeah, my submission is that random server generator, that the workers should communicate through the master, or they can communicate directly, sir. In your diagram, it shows that worker can communicate the external server directly.
No. Worker are communicating to the external server directly. You see here, this is directly with the workers. But when they are communicating among themselves, there is no master actually. There is only one process which writes it. Apart from that, there is no master. But when they are communicating the value of pi among themselves, they are using a new communicator, so that the server is not into that.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Okay.
If you read about, I'll tell you, if you read about William Grobb's, I mentioned about William Grobb's book. And this is very detailed. William Grobb has. I'll give you put the William Grobb's book also. It's in William Grobb's book. If you read about William Grobb's. Also in Quinn's book, Parallel Programming in C. Quinn has a chapter on parallel random number generators, and all these books are available online. In their website, they have uploaded some of these chapters. Okay.
Amrit, can you please unmute yourself and speak?
My question is two parts. So one is there an overhead when we are considering large numbers or random number generation? And
surely there will be an overhead. A processor, you can see the code that it is generating random number and one by one sending to the other processes. So whoever has not received it, they are waiting. There is a huge difference. But the amount of data that is being sent is also small. It's only a one-dimensional array. So in that sense, you can avoid that.
Okay.
There
and
is
the second part is, now all of these methods that we have discussed are basically two-dimensional approaches. Are there approaches more than two-dimensional?
No.
Considering
Laplace equation is mostly in practice you do not do parallelization for 2D problems. You do it for 3D problems. I'm showing in two-dimensional because in slides it is easy to show two-dimensional. But the actual codes, if you see any complex code, it should be three-dimensional. But 2D you will not do that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Supro, can you please unmute yourself and speak?
Yeah.
Yeah, Supro, once again unmute yourself.
Hello. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yes. Hello, Professor. Good afternoon. My question is more regarded on the industrial side of the problems, and it's particularly related to the graph partitioning. So for very highly nonlinear structural problems, generally we'll use a parallel graph partitioner. So for example, Parmetis or PT Scotch. Now, if the process is has got a high strain dependence and it is already nonlinear, so what happens is some bodies come into contact and some bodies they lose contact. Means I'm particularly talking about a contact problem. So what we have generally observed is that to get the load balancing correct, we need to do the graph partitioning after certain steps. Means we need to repeat, but that adds a huge amount of overhead. So are there any heuristics that we can use to tackle this problem, or means just ensure that the initial graph partitioning is means they are generated in such a way that the contacting nodes are in close neighbors, not like process 1 is communicating with process 1000 and it is adding to the
neighbor. Something called, you have to read the textbook. I mean, some of the particle interaction type of problems we do it ourselves using something coming from scratching our heads, but I am not sure about any formal method in that sense, but you can look into textbooks. There are adaptive domain decomposition, etc., adaptive load balancing. Some of the methods are there. I'm not very well aware about this, but there can be something. Usually we do very ad hoc things to just see that how this can be managed if something comes out, etc. But there should be something else.
All right, thanks. Can I ask a second question if the time permits? And let's assume that it's a very means it's not a very highly nonlinear problem. It has got a well-defined solution, well balanced. So in that case, graph partitioning is not scalable at very high cores, because if you partition at very high cores, then most of your time goes into MPI that all reduce and all by all communication, and you spend really much less time in doing that compute. So means one strategy is to partition in low number of cores and then give that to a high number of cores for solve. Are there but that works for if the problem is linear, but if the problem is non-linear, again that has got means their own problems.
These pros and cons, a lot of things are there. They require more detailed attention. But one thing we usually found following fluid mechanics is using a block partition mesh, block structured mesh. So there are blocks of structured mesh, and instead of doing the partitioning over the entire unstructured mesh, the blocks are arranged in unstructured method, and we do the block partitioning. In that case, if my deformation is limited only to a particular domain, I do a readjustment of those domains only, which in some sense helps us to get less overhead.
Yeah, means I get it that it will work out for the fluid domains because it is pretty structured, but for solid bodies, they are means they are really unstructured.
I'm probably not the best person to answer that. There can be some heuristics. You need to probably find out more. There should be some implementations. Definitely.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Subro, for the questions. Thank you all the participants for the question. If you have further questions, you can always email to the address mentioned, we will forward it to the speaker. Okay, you can directly mail also if you want. You can mail directly, or you can mail to the, yeah, here is the address. You can mail to this address. Okay, so if there are no other questions, then we close the session. We thank Professor Roy very much for the excellent talk.